back there. Good morning, church. I am sitting here with Eric and Allison Liles, who have been with us at the Chapel of the Transfiguration for the last several weeks. One more Sunday.
That's right.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's
I
been
know.
great.
We're going to miss you. So thank you for coming and spending this time with me. I just have 3 questions to ask you today. I'm going to ask this of all the chaplains this summer, and the point of our conversation is to go however deeply you want to go and respond in however you will respond. And I'll ask the same questions of all the chaplains throughout the summer. So the first question, and either of you can start, y'all decide which one wants to start, but from whence have you come? How do you come to be a part of our community here for the month of June?
Well, I'm Allison, and I grew up in Alabama, so I always say that that's where I came from, even though I don't sound like it most of the time. I grew up in a little town called Decatur in North Alabama and was completely shaped there. I was baptized, confirmed, ordained, and married, all in the same church.
Wow.
And met Eric in Virginia, and Virginia really got into our blood there. We ended up back in Alabama for a brief time and then back to Virginia, where we really, really thrived there in the mountains. And
you met at the seminary,
we
right?
met in the seminary, yeah.
Which is also where I went to seminary.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then we have most recently come to Jackson from Dallas, and the way that we got to the chapel from Dallas is really part of Eric's story, so I'll let him share that.
Yeah, sure. I have when I grow up, Jimmy, I want to be a singer-songwriter.
Nice.
And I've been working on this song. It's called West Texas Wind, which you can relate to the West Texas Wind.
Yes, I can.
There's a verse of it that's, it's autobiographical. My daddy was born in Odessa, my mama, Bakersfield. If you hear some twang in my voice, Alabama for 5 years. So
Right.
I come by way of California. I was born and raised there. We're both cradle Episcopalians also. So I think that's a big part of who we are and our formative process to get to where we are today here. As Allison mentioned, we met in Virginia Seminary, and then I did a doctoral program at Swanee while we were serving in Alabama and in Virginia. And then when we left Virginia, we moved to Dallas so I could take a job at St. Michael and All Angels, which is a great church. And I've been in charge of adult formation, all of formation there, overseeing the staff and everything. Formation's a big part, teaching's a big part of my ministry. Jimmy and I knew each other briefly. We actually taught a class together in Austin at a CLC conference in 2000
that was a long time ago.
Something.
Yeah.
And we swapped a parishioner when I was in Virginia and you were in Thad's. And then Jimmy's brother is a parishioner at St. Michael's in Dallas. Reed.
He sure is.
He's a great guy. And we'd been looking since we moved to Dallas for some sort of summer activity that got us out of the heat of Texas. And Jimmy was gracious enough to invite us to come up here. And we were going to come last summer, and then COVID happened. And you still said come, which was so gracious of you, but we really wanted to come and do the work at the chapel. And it's been an awesome experience.
Well, and I'm glad you did. The chapel is such a special place, and it's such an important part of our work here and the spiritual life of the valley. And so I would have totally understood if you guys last summer were like, yeah, let's get out of here and go. And some of our chaplains did and come and one of them, who I think you know, Travis Helms. Do you know Travis? Maybe not. Travis spent some time working with us just here at St. John's because the chapel was closed. But it's great to have y'all here. It's nice to make those connections. I love the Bakersfield, Odessa too, because people might not know that Bakersfield has a legitimate country music genealogy too. It's not just Texas or that's awesome. So second question, either of you can start again, relatively broad one, but what's saving you these days?
Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
One of the most important parts of my priesthood for the past 15 years has been connecting with people who are doing similar ministries to inspire one another, to share resources. And I have found that my women colleague groups have saved me the most.
More than one?
Yes.
Yeah,
So I've had
cool.
different ones depending on where I've lived. And I started my current job about 3 years ago. And right after I started, a friend from seminary had started a new job at a small church in Connecticut. And she had this hunch that the way that we were doing small church ministry was wrong. That we were doing what she called baby big church. That we were taking what worked for big churches and then just shrinking it, shrinking the budget, shrinking the staff, shrinking the ministries, instead of treating it like an entirely different organization. And so we, for the past 3 years, have had this small church, we call it Small Churches Big Impact Collective.
Cool.
We've since gotten a grant from Austin Presbyterian Seminary to work on seminary courses to prepare people for small church ministry.
Great.
And we have a podcast that we've recorded the first season, and then it'll come out later this summer.
Oh, great.
To think through ways to change the organizational model, like right-sizing our vestries, doing away with committees, which has been one of the most liberating parts of my job. And to really glorify all the gifts of small churches, that it's not just a place that people get stuck right out of seminary because the bishop tells them to go there, but that we
It could be a
actually
vocation.
love it.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're working towards getting the whole Episcopal Church to recognize it as a legitimate vocation
Yeah.
so that people can choose it and then be supported financially for it. Because right now, a lot of us can't stay in small churches because it doesn't support the family. We're only able to do it because we have very gracious partners who bring in the health insurance or bring
Yeah.
in the mortgage payment.
Yeah.
So
Wow,
that is
cool.
definitely giving me a
And
lot
that
of life
resource-
and saving me.
Would be helpful to the Diocese of Wyoming. I mean, we're a medium size in the summer large church, but the majority of the churches in the Diocese of Wyoming are quite small, and
Yeah, and I think
many of
that's
them
what's
very rural. And,
And that's really where the whole Episcopal Church is heading.
Right.
And so we recognize that and realize that that's just not, the church is not preparing for it.
Yeah.
And it should have been decades ago.
Yeah.
And so we hope that it will be an offering, across the
Cool.
church and other denominations.
Oh, that's great, Allison. What about you, Eric? What's saving you these days?
Well, Allison is always saving me. I'm going to start out and be really clear about that. Well, I'm going to share two things. One is sort of unexpected on our trip up here. I have had some kidney issues my whole life, but a couple weeks ago on a Friday, just really developed a really sharp pain and had no idea what was going on. And after about 6 hours of that, went to the ER. And the good people of St. John's are
Not
they saved
St.
me.
John's Health, not St. John's
Health.
Church, though we did.
Both. It's
Yeah.
it's a related thing. And so I had some emergency surgery, and then I went back the next Tuesday and had 3 more kidney stones shocked out of my system.
Welcome to Jackson.
So-
the hospital's
Hospital's
that way.
right there. Yeah.
And then
They-
you showed up to preach 2 days later, which
after
was
the first surgery. Yeah, I did. I preached 2 days later. So yes, the good people of St. John's Health have literally been saving me this month, which has been awesome. But the other thing, I've really been thinking about this a lot, and it has to do with the scripture, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And I took a preaching class with Martin Smith when I was at Swanee. And one of the things that Martin talked about was that the preaching life itself is an act of God for us who are preachers, that we continue to work out our salvation.
Yeah.
And I think that's really true, and I've really come to appreciate that when I am crafting a sermon and when I'm preaching a sermon or reflecting on sermons that I've heard or sharing with other people, that God is in the work of saving me through that process. And that if I wasn't engaged in the preaching life, that I would be maybe drowning in some significant ways. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking about, I was asked to meet with some colleagues here in the diocese a year or two ago, and the bishop charged us with this idea of like, if, could the 3 of you come together and kind of teach a preaching class?
Sure.
And I think it was like, well, y'all are pretty good at what you do. Like, and we all met with just a measure of confusion because there's the craft of like actually getting the sermon prepared, but like that's not what makes, it's like, well,
No.
I mean, I get up at early in the morning and I'm quiet, or I get a little exercise, or I eat oatmeal for breakfast, or
Right.
I
It's
love
all
to go,
part of it.
that's what it's, it's a life lived out 24/7, 365.
I mean, I think back to Virginia Seminary, and we had really great training on preaching. Most of it was the technical part, right? Here's the
Right.
4 pages of a sermon. Here's on Monday you do this and that kind of stuff. But then there was another book I think that we had back then, just sort of about, it's living your life in such a way that you're open, that you're in conversation with God. And the question, I think the really great question to ask, and I think this relates to everything beyond preaching, is, all right, Lord Jesus, what can you and I do together in this endeavor? How can we work? It's not about me. It's not about just me channeling you. It's about us working together. And so approaching our life with that kind of mentality, I think, can be really powerful.
Yeah, that's cool. Sort of like, you want to be a good preacher, go be a good person.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last question.
Okay.
What are you longing for?
Do you want me to go again?
Okay, Allison starting again. Brave.
So I will speak personally. We were trying to think. Do we think globally or in the church? I think personally, I have been doing a lot of work on becoming anti-racist since 2017. We lived in Virginia, moved about 3 weeks from the Charlottesville area before Charlottesville happened.
Wow.
And so that was a huge wake-up call for me. I knew that I had work to do. Personally, I didn't know how much work I had to do. And as I had said before, I grew up in Alabama. And it's, when you're swimming in the water, if you're a fish, you don't know that you're in the water.
Yeah.
And I have slowly realized how much implicit bias I have towards people of color.
Yeah.
And recognizing, as Ibram Kendi says, that that we're all racist. It doesn't make you a bad person. You just need to own it and work towards it.
Right.
And so I'm longing for the time where all the work that I've been doing finally rids myself of all of my implicit biases that I have.
Yeah.
I know we are doing a better job knowing this and how we raise our kids, so that hopefully it's not going to be the issue of undoing things like it has been for us as adults. But we had a great conversation last night. Eric encouraged, he had already seen the series of The Falcon and The Winter Soldier. And I didn't really want to watch it because it was violent. And he kept saying, no, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. And last night, the kids and I watched the finale for the season. And it was all about why a black man can't be Captain America. And so we paused the
You
show
can be the
and had
Panther,
this,
but
and
not
had
the
this
captain.
really intense conversation about what it means to be a black man representing a whole country and whether the country would support him or not and why it's different. As a white person, the blonde hair, blue-eyed Steve,
Yeah.
what was his
Rogers.
could be Captain America.
Right.
So I'm longing for that. I'm longing that for myself and for our kids to be able to go out and really empathize with other people and to be able to see skin color and recognize the privileges that they have as little blonde-haired white kids.
Yeah, beautiful. I share that longing with you.
Yeah.
What about you, Eric?
Jimmy, I am longing for a sense of joy and wonder in all that I do. Something that I've struggled with my whole life is it's really easy for me to figure out what's wrong with something and to work to fix it. We studied the Enneagram, and I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, which is the challenger. There we go. All right.
Never met a table you didn't want to knock over.
That's exactly right. Forgive us, church. We're a special challenge for you all.
But you also need us.
Definitely. You definitely need us. The world needs us a lot, especially now. And so, I've done a lot of inner work with the Enneagram. I'm working towards a master's in counseling, eventually to be a licensed professional counselor as well.
Cool.
And all of that work and inner work really makes me long for a sense of happiness. I'll share one just brief story. I was pre-med at Texas A&M, and I remember...
Try not to hold that against
I
you.
know. Hook 'em horns, there it is. Giggle Maggies. We got it all represented. It's fantastic. And I graduated at 20 and I applied to med school at 19, and I ended up working at Camp Allen this summer after I graduated. And I remember in a prayer conversation with God, God, I didn't get into medical school, and so I was like, I did everything right. Well, God, what do you want me to do? And God's response then, and I think it has held true for my whole life, and it's something I continue to struggle with, is God saying, I want you to do what makes you happy. And so I find joy in lots of ordained ministry, in our marriage, in our family life, with our kids, and all kinds of things. But I struggle a lot as an 8 with a Challenger of not just focusing on what needs to be changed or what could be better.
Yeah.
And so what I'm longing for is that deep and abiding sense of joy and wonder in all of God's creation, and a sense of happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that really resonates with me, of course, because we're a similar type. And the words that I've been using in my own life, and I have some strategy around that this year personally, but the words that I've been using is contentment.
Yes.
And also the contentment being to some degree the goal, but the work that I have toward that with my similar longing is integration. It's just really beginning to connect each aspect of my work with my family life, with my social life, with my social aspirations, like becoming anti-racist. Like, how does all of this work come together? It's to some degree like, I remember Phyllis Tickle talking about the church and how, well, the church is in this process where we're unbraiding all the strands of the rope, and we're carefully examining each strand. And I sit at 51 where I'm like, okay, I've carefully looked at each strand of the rope, and now the work that I have to do is rebraiding the rope. Or there, Richard, I don't know if y'all have read Falling Upward by Richard Rohr, fantastic book, but Rohr references the Homer, where he says, Odysseus's journey is external in the first half of his life, but then, the oracle tells him, like, okay, pick up this oar and carry it inland until no one knows what it is. That inward journey is second half of life work. Oh, that's beautiful. Really beautiful.
That's incredible. I preached about contentment on Sunday.
Oh, cool.
As I'm an Enneagram 1, very present focused. And so I find contentment always.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting how Eric and I share so many things, but are so different. Like it's just the diversity within these, our created beings.
Yeah.
We just approach the world in such different ways. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and here's my 8 Challenger, Richard Rohr, who writes about the Enneagram beautifully. Yeah. And I completely agree with the first half of life and external and second half of life. But I think it's really important to remind people that the second half of life doesn't have to wait until you're a certain age.
Right.
Or that you've gone through certain tragedy.
Yeah.
Right.
That inner work can begin early in life, in childhood even.
Yeah.
And so Richard doesn't necessarily communicate that in a way that I think needs to be, because I think so many people think, well, I'll spend the first 50 years of my life climbing that ladder, and then I'll deal with this other stuff. But you got to deal with that stuff, the inner stuff, all the time. It's really important. So it's my Challenger for Richard.
No, it's good, and I think that affects how you parent too.
It does.
Like we're raising an 8, and we are constantly trying to help them with their inner work, even as young children, so they don't have to put it off until later.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for this crew?
Just gratitude,
So
really.
much
We are so
gratitude,
thankful to be
yeah.
here. Jackson is a really special place. The chapel is an amazing place. You're an amazing guy. But it's just such a gift for us to have this experience as a family together. So thank you for that. And thank you to everybody who's come out to the chapel. And hopefully we'll see some more of you all on Sunday out there. Look forward to being out there again.
And let us express our gratitude for you coming and sharing your gifts with us. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about this chapel program that we have. And one of the fun things for me in my job is like, okay, like what interesting voices can we pull into this valley and and cross-fertilize our own embodiment of the faith with. So, and it's so fun to have a clergy couple.
We
too.
keep hearing that too.
Yeah.
And, Eric and I have only served together a handful of times in our 15 years of marriage
Yeah,
that's
and
cool.
ordination.
Yeah.
So it's been a
been a good
huge
joy.
gift to be able to negotiate that little space
Yeah.
and then hear each other preach, which also doesn't happen a lot in
Right.
our ministry.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Been awesome.
Well, thanks to you both. And
Thank
hey,
you.
church, thanks for tuning in and listening to our conversation. We'll come back to you next month with some time with the Reverend Chip Edens, who's rector of Christ Church Charlotte and also knows